Nelson Mandela died on Thursday at the age of 95 after the former South African president suffered with a recurring lung infection. Mandela, South Africa's first black president, is known throughout the world as a towering statesman who led his country through bloodshed and turmoil to democracy. After the introduction of apartheid in 1948, he and other young radicals took over the leadership of the African National Congress, turning it into a militant campaigning political organisation. While committed to non-violence, the ANC mounted civil disobedience campaigns that led to the arrest of 8,500 people. The killing of 69 black South Africans, including women and children, by security forces during a protest against apartheid laws in Sharpeville in 1960 became a watershed. The massacre led to the ANC abandoning its policy of non-violence, and Mandela was among the first to advocate armed resistance, going underground in 1961. After his return in 1962, he was captured and sentenced to 5 years for incitement and illegally leaving the country. While serving this sentence, Mandela was charged along with other anti-apartheid leaders in the 1963 Rivonia treason trial. In June 1964, he was given a life sentence with hard labour. Mandela's imprisonment began with breaking rocks on the notorious Robben Island prison in Table Bay off Cape Town, a place of incarceration infamous for more than 200 years. A life sentence at this time generally meant 20 years with time off for good behaviour. Mandela was to serve 27 years. After nearly 3 decades in jail, Mandela walked from Victor Verster prison a free man on February 11, 1990, having refused to bargain for his release. Mandela wrote of that day, "As I finally walked through the gates, I felt even at the age of 71 that my life was beginning anew. My 10,000 days of imprisonment were at last over." 2 days after his release, he returned home to a tumultuous welcome from the people of Soweto, where more than 120,000 people packed a stadium for the biggest political rally in South African history. Less than 3 months later, Mandela led an unbanned ANC delegation in the first face-to-face talks with South African President F.W. de Klerk and government officials. Mandela's election as ANC president in July 1991, replacing the ailing Oliver Tambo, gave him greater authority to negotiate with the white-led government. Mandela faced possibly his most painful trial when his second wife Winnie was convicted of kidnapping 4 youths and of being an accessory to assault. In April 1992, he announced their separation, citing personal reasons. Details of a cold relationship and Winnie's affairs with younger men emerged in a public divorce hearing in 1996. Mandela and de Klerk were jointly awarded the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of their efforts to end white domination and pave the way for transforming South Africa into a multiracial democracy. While Mandela has spoken of his anger at his incarceration by the National Party, generally he has not dwelt in public on his suffering behind bars. During a visit to Robben Island on the 4th anniversary of his release, he said he and his cellmates felt the sacrifice had been worthwhile. Political violence, mainly between ANC and Inkatha Freedom Party supporters during the lead-up to the country's first all-race elections, cost thousands of lives. But in April 1994, an estimated 23 million people cast their votes during 4 days of voting, in an election hampered by logistical problems but relatively free of violence. The ANC won 62.25% of the vote, in control of 8 of the 9 regional assemblies. Speaking after voting, Mandela quoted from the now famous address he made during the Rivonia trial. "I have fought very firmly against white domination. I have fought very firmly against black domination. I cherish the idea of a new South Africa, where all South Africans are equal." On May 10, 1994, Mandela was formally inaugurated as South Africa's first black head of state before a world audience. A Mandela presidency, something millions of black South Africans had only dared dream about, had become a reality. Mandela made reconciliation the theme of his presidency. The hallmark of his crusade was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which probed apartheid crimes on both sides of the struggle and tried to heal the country's wounds. On his 80th birthday in July 1998, Mandela married his third wife, Gracia Machel, widow of former Mozambican President Samora Machel. His decision to step down voluntarily after one 5-year term as president was seen as a shining example to other African leaders who stubbornly clung to power. At home, Mandela made headlines when he publicly challenged the government's controversial views on AIDS. He was given a standing ovation from 15,000 delegates when he attended the world's biggest AIDS conference in Barcelona in July 2002. Shortly before his 86th birthday, Mandela formally bowed out of public life, saying he was retiring from retirement and his punishing schedule of public appearances. Months of international celebrations marked his 90th birthday throughout the summer of 2008. Appearing frail but smiling, he attended numerous events held to rally support for his charitable work and to pay tribute to his life. Mandela and his wife briefly toured the Soccer City Stadium during the World Cup closing ceremony, where he received an ecstatic welcome from the crowd. It was to be his last major public appearance. Mandela remains a hero to many of South Africa's 52 million people, and 2 brief stretches in hospital in the last 2 years made front-page news. Acclaimed by all sides of society in South Africa and recognised as the undoubted elder statesman and moral authority of Africa, Mandela enjoys international affection, admiration and prestige.